When I would say like I'm comfortable at a wide range of investment size. This deal happened to be, it was a $1.5 billion transaction.
All right, we're live. Episode 16. Jonathan Langer, CEO and founder, Fireside Investments. Thanks for having me in your beautiful apartment here in the city. I appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining the show. Before we get further into your career and kind of really unwind everything that you're building here at Fireside, certainly want to learn more about your early days exiting school and then going to Goldman. But before that, do you want to give an intro on yourself and the company?
Yeah, so Jonathan Langer. I founded Fireside a little over 6 years ago now, and we're a private equity firm. We're real estate fundamentals, but we invest in operating businesses. We don't buy assets. We will invest in businesses that own assets, operate assets. So we're platform builders. We like to invest in businesses that have strong fundamentals. Yep. Some of the typical cliche things, but It's true. And alongside people that we like, trust, and can build long-term relationships with, and looking for someone like us to sort of partner with them as they try and grow their businesses.
Yeah, and a lot of really cool businesses, from Collective Retreats, which is amazing, it looks like, and then the Hot Springs deal you guys did a little bit. So many cool different companies that you guys invest in that I want to ask you about here in a little bit. But so you went to school at Wharton to study economics. After that, was the plan always to go to Goldman? Was that like this dream, or how did you end up going there? Was investment banking always the path, or didn't kind of know?
It was actually anything but that.
Okay.
As I always say, I grew up in basically a family of doctors. My father was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, my older brother, when I was sort of making the choice of where to go to college, was in med school. He's now a neurosurgeon, and so and I really had no exposure to the business world at all.
Wow.
And kind of no mentor, right?
Interesting.
Saying go to business or this, do this or that. But I did have my brother and my father basically saying, because I had the similar toolkit that my brother had, strong science, strong math, I thought I'd be a doctor. And but they were kind of like, look, you don't want to be a doctor. They kind of saw what was happening in the medical field, how it was changing, the sort of the increasing influence of insurance companies and the sort of regulatory overlay, middle management and hospital systems and things like that. They were making a much more challenging environment to actually just practice medicine in a way that was productive, et cetera. So,
and was your brother much older than you?
He's 6 years older.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, I was highly impressionable and I trusted them. And so when I was applying to college, I decided I'm going to go do business, whatever business meant, right?
Yeah.
It just, all I know is it wasn't.
I don't think anyone knows at 18 or 17 anyways, right?
Particularly me.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the beginnings of my career, and when I give advice to young people too, like saying like, what should I do or whatever, you got to get a little lucky in life sometimes. Yeah. And in my case, I got very lucky because there was a person who I was friendly with who was 1 year ahead of me at school. And, I didn't do internships and I didn't have a lot of people they know what they want to do. Yeah. They get the internship sophomore, junior, or whatever in college. And then they get the job opening, subsequently.
I think they have this funnel, this path they know they're going down.
They know
this feeder.
How to do it.
Yeah.
And I was sort of, I don't know, I just wasn't as focused.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I exactly want to do anyway.
Sure.
Do I go to law school? I wasn't sure. In fact, I taught Princeton Review throughout college to make money.
Oh, wow.
And I subsequently learned, I was teaching the SAT, and then the opportunity came to me to go teach the LSAT.
Wow.
And I was like a junior now in college. So I learned how to take the LSAT, and when I took the practice test, I did really well. And I was like, maybe, if I can get a good LSAT score, maybe I should go to law school.
Sure. Yeah.
And so when I actually took the LSAT, I actually scored worse than I did on the practice test when I was learning to be a teacher. And literally, it sounds silly, but but it speaks to like where I wasn't, mentally. I was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't go to law school.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe it's not the right thing. So anyway, I had a friend who was 1 year older than me who he was working at a private equity firm in Chicago called JMB Realty Corporation, and JMB was one of the at least in the 80s, they were one of the first big. They were probably the first true institutionally focused real estate private equity firm.
Wow.
And a lot of people that have worked there, like Barry Sternlicht and John Schreiber, who basically started Blackstone Real Estate, came from there, and I worked with those people when I was there, actually.
No way.
And so, so anyway, he'd been working there. He was a first year analyst, and they hire kids out of college every year. He's like, "Look, come here." And I had submitted my application. I had submitted a resume to consulting firms and investment banks, and I maybe got like 1 or 2 interviews that I kind of flailed at because I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, right.
Very honest.
Yeah.
And so this is the one opportunity that was real. As I flew out there and did the interviews and got a job there, and it turned out this was like private equity firm. I didn't know what private equity was,
of course,
at the time, and so that was lucky. And then I got when I was there, I got a few people I worked for, mentors that took me under their wing, and I'm still close to them. Awesome. Again, another stroke of luck a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was a really good experience. And actually, at the time, that JMB had gone through some upheaval. They had some big losses, and so they had, sort of investors were. It was the early '90s in that recession, and so it was like they were kind of retooling. And so we kind of when I got there, they were sort of on their back foot a little bit, and they were they didn't have any fun. It was sort of very much of a do-it-yourself. We had to find the deals, diligence the deals, raise the money for every deal. Mm-hmm. They were a fundless sponsor at the time.
Wow.
And looking back, it was super lucky because I got exposure and access to all kinds of parts of the business. Mm-hmm. Not just doing deals, but raising capital and actually, as opposed to hiring a consulting firm or some third party to do your diligence, we did the diligence ourselves. Yeah. We read all the contracts and things like that because we were scrappy. And so looking back, and it's very hard to get that experience now in some of the more established firms. As I see a lot of young people. It's hard to find a place where you can get that breadth of experience. Anyway, so I got that breadth of experience. At the time I was dating long distance my future wife who was in law school in New York City, and we were kind of like, look, if this is ever going to work, we got to live in the same city. So I was probably a year and a half into JMB, and I was talking to literally my parents about trying to get back, and they said, oh, you should speak to this guy Stuart, who was from our hometown, who I didn't know, but who basically works at Goldman Sachs. You should call him.
Sure.
So I called him, and as luck would have it, they had just started the real estate private equity group at Goldman in 1980. They started in 1983 or whatever, and he was one of the 2 partners, kind of doing it. He basically
rolling it out. Yeah.
He was a real estate investment banker, and they were they picked him to do this. So they were basically it was perfect time. They were we need people.
Sure.
They're staffing up. So they did a phone call. They hired me over the phone.
That's
basically.
Insane.
And next thing I know, I was back in New York, working at Goldman. So that's kind of my story. It's not the typical story, I know, but
that's a great story.
That's mine.
But I think that the initial getting any job in a high pressure environment where there's management coming and going, kind of like you're saying at JMB, where there's it's a tumultuous work environment, you can kind of really develop your entrepreneurial skills in a way, because there's no, hey, do this today, Jonathan. It's all right, we got to raise money, I guess, and then learn how to read all the contracts. So I'm sure that served you well over time. So when you got to Goldman, you end up being making partner. You were there for 16 or 17 years. It's quite a career that not a lot of people progress to, right? That's amazing. So over the years, how did you, I guess you started in real estate, but how did that get more into the experiential space and then leisure and lodging? Did it start with a more broad kind of focal point when you started, and what was your career as you got there?
That's funny. So when I started at Goldman, we were still in the middle of this recession, coming out of this recession. It was the days of the RTC. They were basically, the government had seized a bunch of banks and S&Ls and was selling loan portfolios. And so the first, 6 months, get thrown into the fire.
Exactly.
All of a sudden we were like underwriting loan books, right? And so that we did a lot of that, and whatever they told me to do, I was doing, obviously, working my ass off, obviously. And as another funny story, like when they started Whitehall, which is what the group was called, they basically said, we're going to do all these things, but there's two things we're not going to do. We're not going to do development, and we're not going to do hotels. And lo and behold, like there was a deal that came in. It was a hotel development in Santa Monica. It was a hotel called Shutters on the Beach.
Cool.
It was basically a loan. The prior developer had spent half the money, and they went bankrupt because he ran out of money.
Wow.
And so we bought the loan along with a local partner, and I was put on the deal by, I wasn't running the deal, but I was put on the deal. And so one of the first real deals, specific deals I worked on was this hotel deal. And so we basically finished the development. It's a very successful hotel, famous hotel now.
Yep.
And then I worked on the development aspects and some of the operational aspects, and sort of exposed to that world. And then we subsequently bought a Westin hotel company, and that was that was more of a private equity style deal. We bought a company, not an asset. And because
how big was that deal?
That was probably like a $600 million transaction, which back then was big.
Yeah.
And we actually partnered with we had a real estate group, and we had a regular private equity group. We partnered with them because it had a lot of non-real estate aspects to it, and that was also done in partnership with Starwood Capital, Barry Sternlight. So I met Barry Sternlight through that again, kind of thing. So the three of us did that deal, but I was, luckily there weren't that many people around. I'd had this hotel experience, and they basically gave me a lot of runway to drive. I was basically the point person on Westin. So again, super lucky. And so, the diligence aspects, all the structuring, and it was a complex transaction to buy it. And then once we bought it, there were a bunch of restructuring aspects we had to do with the company. We did a bit of management change. We sort of reoriented the company strategy from where it had been. And so I was in the middle of all of that. I basically, when we closed the company, I flew to Seattle. I lived in Seattle for a few months.
No way.
And I was like the asset manager for the transaction because there was no asset management group either. So it was like we were doing everything. I was doing everything. And so literally, it was so fortunate for me. I got exposure to all aspects of not just the lodging space, but just how to do a deal, how to do it right. And but through that process, I sort of expanded my exposure to the lodging space, my contact base, and it's a little bit, I don't know if you talk to other people about the hotel deals, but once it's in your blood, it's like it's a passion. And so it still is to that degree.
I love it. So how long were you working with Westin over your time at Goldman? Because you were on the board. I've seen your career on your website and then on LinkedIn too, right? Like you're on the board of all these amazing companies. You're on the board at Westin. How does that get involved later in time? Is that a byproduct of being a steward of their business, or is that in a way kind of the business approach for Goldman for you to be able to influence good behavior at that company? Like how does it happen that you get on the board of another company that you guys acquire? Kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think just private equity generally.
Someone's gonna.
You need representation. At these companies, it's generally done through a board seat. It could also be done more informally, but generally you constitute a board, and that's the primary way you interact with management and things like that. Give them direction. They can ask you questions and make decisions because these are control investments. So we control these companies. So you control through the board. And again, in that case, I was lucky. They were like, generally speaking, it would be somebody much more senior that would be on these boards. And there were other people besides me that were on the board, but they were like, you're so involved in this, it's silly not to have you on the board, Westin or other deals. So, but certainly as you get more senior, it's more obvious. Yeah. I should be a board member, but like in that case, I was lucky enough that they had confidence in me that to put me on the board.
Yeah, awesome. So we're compressing this 17 or 16-year story into just a couple minutes here, but what do you think the biggest challenges were for you along the way in making partner, right? I talked with Kellen yesterday. It's something he was an MD. It's something people aspire to be and not everyone can simply do, right? It's just too competitive, and I don't know how you would say it, right? But the cream rises to the top. What do you think, looking back now, was maybe more of your prouder moments of like, or what were the harder years, or what were the biggest challenges in getting to that pinnacle at such a premier company?
That's a good question. I mean, it's like this, sometimes they could seem like a straight line, but it's not. There's definitely ups and downs in any person's career. Certainly, I experienced that at Goldman. I think that there was a time where and this is, I'll give Goldman props in terms of the culture they build, and there's a very intensive review process, right? 360-degree reviews, and you get feedback from people above, below you, peers, and things like that. And I say this now in life too, personally too, like getting feedback is super valuable.
100%.
To everybody, right? Everyone should want feedback so they know how they're being perceived. And there was a time where I was perceived as someone that was like too hard charging, a little arrogant, maybe a lot arrogant, and sort of selfish, right?
How many years in did that feedback come? Was that like 3 or 4 years in, or further?
Probably, well, I got glimpses of this probably a couple years in. I didn't really hear it, right? Probably.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, well, exactly.
Until I did, you know what I mean? So
sure.
I was probably 5-6 years in where I was really started to hear this more consistently. And again, people that cared about me said, look, if you want to have success here, you got to address this, right? And so I did. Yeah. I tried to take a hard look at myself and the way I was relating to other people, particularly people below me, and the way I treated them, and the patience level I had for people. I wasn't doing it right. At least I wasn't doing it the way you do it at Goldman, right?
Yeah.
And so that was like, again, super lucky that I got that feedback early in my career. Because sometimes if you don't get it early enough, it's hard to make these changes, as I see it. And so that was probably the low point where I was like, because I thought I was doing well and thought I was smart and obviously wanted to make partner. But there were people saying to me, look, if you want to make partner, you gotta address this, because it's not gonna work here otherwise. And then Goldman's it's a funny place. They dangle this carrot, and
which is what, partner or MD or
whatever,
okay.
just whatever promotion generally, right? But obviously everyone the big carrot is making partner, and that they know what they're doing. It engenders like people working super hard, and to some degree there can be some jostling, right?
Sure,
like
any other competitive,
and that was probably for me personally, it's like I really did not like. Accessing the whole the political side of it. Yeah. That probably hurt me, to be honest, But looking back, I wouldn't do it either way. Maybe it took me 2 years longer to make partner than it maybe otherwise would have if I had played the game, quote unquote. But that's me, So I just try to stay true to myself, and it worked out, obviously. So
yeah, I would say. So in transitioning out of Goldman, you went to Bain for like a year and a half or 2 years. As operating partner, they're obviously a massive powerhouse. What did that entail, so to speak? And what did you do there? What side of private equity did you focus on when you made that jump?
Yeah, so when I joined Bain, they were tinkering with what to do with real estate. Okay. Big asset class, like should we get in, should we not get in? I came to them with a very specific focus. Like as I matured at Goldman, I became convinced that the best way to play real estate was by investing in businesses and platforms like I do now, as opposed to just buying individual office buildings, et cetera.
Yeah. So more on the operating side.
Exactly. It's sort of a private equity, framework put onto real estate. And when I started talking to them, that appealed to them because they're a big private equity shop. But they weren't 100% sure whether that space was big enough and whether there'd be enough to do. And so we both agreed to basically try it out. Like I basically entered the firm, from a seniority perspective as a partner of the firm, but it was like a trial basis. And they put a team under me to give me some resources. And it was like, let's go find some deals, number one, which we did. And let's also just do a little more research into whether whether we could raise a fund around this, or whether it could be a big vertical in their private equity, private equity fund. And when it came down to it, it just wasn't big enough for them. like what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like, and sure, I could have said, well, let's start amassing assets. Let's just become another Blackstone. Everyone says another Blackstone. It's like euphemistically for just basically just raising a lot of money and buying real estate more broadly. Obviously, Blackstone does.
Right.
They invest in business too, but they buy lots of assets. And so I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be sort of an accumulator of assets under management. And
just for pure size. So it wasn't big enough for them because it wouldn't bring enough just number AUM.
There wasn't enough deals to do from their point of view in what I wanted to do strategically.
Okay,
right,
fair enough.
And I agree with that. By the way, I wasn't sure either. Like, and by the way, like Bain, some of the things I would have wanted to do under my umbrella of operating businesses, they were already doing. They'd invested in hospitals, for example, they bought HCA, right? So that would, in theory, have been, it's a real estate, operating asset. Obviously there's a huge operating element to that, but that was already covered, by different people. So as I realized that the sort of the pie was a little smaller in terms of the kind of things I could focus on.
Absolutely.
I think we both recognized that just probably wasn't a good fit. And then you had, like any other institution, you had lots of other people, lots of other mouths to feed. People saying, so it was kind of thing where like it was an amicable decision where we said, you know what, I'm better off, not being exclusive and sort of detaching myself. We're still, I have a good relationship with that firm. We bought
the Hot Springs
together. We also bought this company called IMC together that I subsequently bought from them.
Oh, cool.
With Blackstone. So it's a good relationship. And I think it worked out well for both of us. And now they've got a big real estate business that's like a Blackstone.
Sure.
Like they're trying to be like a Blackstone.
Yeah.
That does include all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so good for them.
Absolutely. But that kind of led you into a critical point, I'm sure, in your life. So in 2011, when you leave there, what was so you detect or realize, hey, this isn't the best fit for me? At what point were you like, because you've had this immaculate career at Goldman, Bain is such a high pedigree company to have on your resume too. At what point are you like, I'm gonna go the entrepreneurial route? Like before I unpack your company or we talk about it, like what were you thinking when you did that?
It's kind of like maybe it's embarrassing. I wish I could say, okay, I wanted to go have my own business. It was a bit more serendipitous. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I think that I always said play to your strengths, right? So I felt like my strengths were working and leading an effort inside of a big organization, like a Goldman or Bain Capital or whatever. So I thought that was what I wanted to do. And so I talked to a lot of the other big firms, TPG, KKR, et cetera, about they were all trying to start their own thing. And for one reason or another, it wasn't the right fit for either of us. And so I ended up, sort of a little bit in the interim period. I was on a public company board called Morgan's Hotel Group. They needed a CEO for that business to get the company sold. So I became CEO of Morgan's Hotel Group on an interim basis, got the company sold. And then, I was sort of, when that company got sold, it was the same kind of thing. What am I going to do? What's the right thing for me personally? And there was still this desire to kind of, it's like it's hard to get it out of yourself.
Always.
Right? Like, what am I good at? This is probably what I'm good at. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up getting hired to become CEO of NorthStar Realty Finance. So there's a very large diversified equity REIT. It was actually started by one of my mentors at Goldman. And so there was a search, but, we had a good relationship and, we were comfortable with each other. And so I took that job. I thought that'd be a 10 or 15 year job. I was super excited about it, working with him again. And they basically bought real estate operating platforms, kind of like what I really wanted to do.
All under the REIT? Because there was an asset management part to the business
under
too?
the REIT, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean, the asset management portion was like more of a non-traded REIT overlay. But, it was all, those things would be in the REIT. And as luck would have it, we became the target of shareholder activism and, the company got put in play. It wasn't, it was sort of forced action. We ended up selling the company to Colony Capital.
Yeah, I saw that.
I could have stayed, but I just, it's the wrong chemistry for me, let's say. And so, it was again, like, okay, what am I going to do? And it was that point I was like, you know what? If I'm ever going to do something on my own,
sure,
now's the time.
Absolutely.
And I did. So I basically, started myself, right? And, the old cliche, like a guy in a cell phone, that's kind of what it was. I was given office space by a friend of mine to kind of like, hang my hat for a little bit. And I'm grateful for the opportunity my friend did that for me. And that's how it started. And so I'm obviously, look back, super grateful, like about how the ball bounced. Cause this is not a job. This is like, I love what I do now. And I always say was lucky in general because I was sort of, my first job was in private equity and it happens to be an industry and a field that suits my skills and I enjoy, and one that I enjoy, right?
Yeah.
Like what more do you want than that?
Exactly right. So you finish at NorthStar. I was reading that the acquisition timeline of Colony Capital, I guess, acquiring NorthStar was only like a couple years or 18 months into your tenure there. I'm like, wow, that's wild. So when you finish there and you have this office space and you have the phone, maybe Fireside, the idea or the name isn't even there yet. But so what's the hypothesis? It's like, hey, this is what I love doing. I know I can create new cash. I know how to buy companies. I know how to value companies, right? Like, what was the first, I guess, maybe year like? How long did it take to get that first deal? Where you just kind of plant your seeds and calling on guys that you've worked on your whole life? Like, how did it progress the first?
Yeah, I spent obviously a fair amount of time like, what
am I doing?
What am I doing? What are we about?
Mm-hmm.
And Fireside, by the way, is the street I grew up on.
Oh, awesome!
As I was a kid, so that's
where
I got the name from. Yeah. And I kind of wanted to build a firm, and sort of from all the learnings I had mistakes, successes, and there were a bunch of things that as I look back with some clarity and some hindsight, that I recognized. One was, when you're in the closed-end fund business, you have these 5-year hold cycles, and you're almost inevitably going to be selling businesses before you should, right?
Sure.
Because you have to recycle capital and things like that. And so, from my point of view, that's not good for an LP.
Sure.
As an LP,
absolutely not.
They're going to pay tax. They're going to have to recycle the capital back in another business,
and maybe something that's not as good of an investment, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, number one, we were not going to do distress. We're buying really good businesses, right? And so I wanted to take a 10 to 20 year lens. I want to buy businesses that you could own for much longer than 5 years, if the conditions are right to do that. So that's one thing I wanted to really try and focus on.
Sure.
Strong business fundamentals and not be a forced seller, right? And that was sort of key to me. And then again, just keep focused on this more narrow part of the, let's say, the real estate landscape, which is to say, real estate operating businesses. So we wouldn't buy a portfolio of office buildings, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there's no. I felt like when you buy an office building or something with a rent roll, let's say, there are many fewer levers you can pull. Right?
100%.
So you're generally making bets on rent growth, occupancy, exit cap rates, how you can finance. A lot of those things are exogenous factors. They're sort of out of your control. You can't really make rents go higher. You can't increase occupancy if demand's not there. You can't make cap rates go down. And so there was the intellectual part for me just wasn't there. I wanted more to hold on to and more to think about, right? Where the people who run the businesses matter, right? Your relationship with them matters. Your strategy matters, right?
Sure.
Where you allocate capital matters, et
Absolutely.
cetera, et cetera. And so, to me, that was more fulfilling, and I felt like I had more agency. But also, when I look back at Goldman, those were our best deals.
Exactly right.
That had those elements about them. And then, to some degree, sort of an add-on, they were our best deals partially because once you control a platform and it's well run, a lot of the bolt-on and add-on deals you do were our best deals, because you sometimes you'd see things off market. You certainly were a better investment selector. You had perfect information or almost perfect information as a buyer, and And so I wanted to invest in businesses that were could grow in that way as well.
100%
through add-on acquisitions, tack-ons, bolt-ons, whatever you want to call them. So those are some of the initial fundamentals I started with, and I also basically said I never wanted Fireside to be huge, right? I wanted to I like being involved, right, in transactions and working with teams and people, and so to a degree, when you have a big fund, 20 or 30 investments, it's sort of
can only do so much.
Oh yeah, it's like whatever, it's like a mile wide, an inch deep, or whatever you want to call it. You can't give the time and attention, and plus you have admin and other aspects, HR aspects that you have to put your focus on. So as much as possible, I wanted to kind of spend as big a percentage of my time actually on the transactions themselves and working with people, because that's what I enjoy the most anyway. So those are some of the fundamentals I started with, and then then it's can I get my the first deal is the hardest.
That's right.
And so the transaction I mentioned to you called IMC, we ended up convincing Bain Capital to sell to me. I brought in Blackstone in that transaction. That really was the sort of helped Fireside get real sea legs under it. Yeah. Because there was some fee income coming in, and and then you had an example of a deal that sort of matched the criteria I described to you.
Yeah. So is this ANDMORE?
Yes.
Okay.
That's now been renamed ANDMORE.
Yeah, I saw this one. They're one of the nation's leaders in kind of like convention space or open market space. Is that right?
So ANDMORE basically is the largest, what I'll call, they're like a B2B showroom business.
Yeah, okay,
So they basically own 20 million square feet of space. Crazy. If you walked in it would look like a regional mall in terms of the way it's laid out.
Got it.
And what happens is you have manufacturers, furniture, home decor, gift products that lease space from us. They build out a showroom, and then we host representatives from U.S. retail. Well, it could be global, but mostly U.S. retail, both online and offline retail. And they come. That's where they do their buying.
Wow.
It's basically a closed system. You or I couldn't walk in there as a consumer. It's only B2B, right? So you have, So you have for furniture stores, Macy's, Bloomingdale's, whatever, maybe those companies don't exist anymore, but they'd come in and they would pick out which, bedding or, furniture they're going to feature in their stores.
Oh, wow.
And so, those decisions get made. It's a very tactile decision. You got to see, look at colors, feel textures. You can't do it any other way but in person for the most part. And so we're the largest, and we're the largest in the space. You basically create a network of that because you have all the manufacturers all in one place, so it makes the buying experience very efficient for these people. Yeah, and so that's what they do.
So do you guys? Because I was looking this morning at a couple of them. I think one in North Carolina, but you have a massive one in Vegas as well. Do you guys own those buildings, or do you own
We own the buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we own the buildings. We operate these basically trade shows, right? Yeah. If you want to call it that. And there is a trade show element to it where you have more like a younger, like a new startup that's saying, we're going to start selling a chair. They could rent a booth, right? More of a trade show for them. And they're trying to get their product out in the market. And this is the most efficient way to have a lot of people see your stuff.
So how did this first deal come? When you're thinking about the first deal, obviously it doesn't always work as hey, this is exactly what I want, and then it happens. But did you know where you were going to raise the capital from? Was there an ideal asset size that you wanted to buy or transact on the first deal? Or was it more, hey, I want my first deal to meet these fundamentals within this range? What was the plan in structuring that first deal?
When I would say I'm comfortable at a wide range of investment size. This deal happened to be, it was a $1.5 billion transaction. Very sizable.
Significant, yeah.
But I've done deals as low as 10 to 20 million and all the way up. Right? And so for me, it's do I like the business? Do I like the team? Could I work with these people?
Yeah.
In this case, I knew that company really well. I bought it. I basically sourced and closed the deal when I was at Bain Capital. So I knew the company very well. Mm-hmm. I knew the CEO very well. We had a good relationship. Oh, wow. And it was one of the first calls I made. I'm like, if you ever, because by then they'd owned it for 5 years or maybe more. And because I just spoke to them, I knew that at some point they'd want to sell it. And so I called the CEO and I said, do you think there's, when are you going to sell this thing? He's like, as a matter of fact, we've been talking about it. And so he put me in touch with the key people at Bain Capital, and I started talking to them. And, I basically became, again, the one, luckily they admitted me to their process because they ran a small bake-off process. Allen & Co. ran the transaction as a banker. So it was, I was competing with like Brookfield and a bunch of others to try and buy the business. Now, wow. But a deal that size, you of course, you need the capital. So I, quickly realized that I would need to bolster, me.
Yeah.
And so I called my friends, called a few places, but I had some friends at Blackstone, and they agreed with me that the business fundamentals were there, and they understood the thesis quickly. And so we partnered up and bought it.
So as far as selecting, obviously this being the first deal, but like you have all of these other investments now, some realized from the car wash, collective retreats, ANDMORE, concert golf partners, all their, yes, very high operational businesses where there's a lot of creativity in them, but they're all, to me, wildly different markets. So like, how are you coming across these deals? Like, how do you scale over time? Maybe it's not this linear process like you were saying earlier in business, but how are you are these deals that are brokers are bringing around? Is this you making the calls? Also, is this you making the call and being like, hey, this is what I can do for you as far as providing capital or giving you an exit? Or is it more owner-operators of businesses are looking to get out and then that gets floated up to someone like you? Like, how is the world of deals work in this niche-ish space?
Yeah, this is, people always say, how do you source your deals? And
well, it's fascinating.
I generally say that deals find me. Is just the way it is. And that's the honest answer. And I think that I think, this is a little bit pat on the back. I think people now understand that I have a reputation as being a good partner and someone that could help a business mature as a company and become more institutional, raise real institutional capital. So the IMC ANDMORE example is probably, I wouldn't put in that bucket. That was like it was a bigger business that was more of like a large cap deal, let's say. But a lot of the other things we've done have been more mid stage. You have companies that are have proven themselves but have yet to punch through, as I say, and raise big capital and and grow. And so I think those are the perfect scenarios where you have people running a business who have yet to really dance on the institutional stage. Let's say I have, right? Sure. And so it's finding those marriages is what we do right now. And in a lot of cases, people come to us. They say, "Oh, you did that deal. Like, what about my transaction?" And it's not just directly to me. Now, I have a team, and so it's a bit more spokes to the wheel, if you will, that can help source things. That's generally how these things come about. There have been a couple instances where we picked industries like the car wash industry that we just thought had a lot of legs to them.
Cool.
And so we were a bit more proactive in trying to find
interesting
an opportunity to invest in. And so in that case, it was a little bit of both. You know what I mean? Like I think we were like proactively prospecting and seeking things, and then we ended up meeting a team that was pre-institutional, like I described to you, and it was a good combination because I lent institutional credibility, Goldman Sachs, and all that stuff, and they had these guys with their guys, grinding and doing the deals and running the business, day to day, but had never done it before.
And it was small. I want to save that deal if we want to talk about one deal kind of, so to speak, in depth at the end, because it's a very cool story from what I've read. As far as like the operational point of your company, these assets, kind of like we've been talking about, are all, I keep looking at the pictures here on the website, but they're all very different, but they're all very unique in these rich, like especially collective retreats, right? So it's these unique experiences. You can't just spin up the Governor's Island tomorrow, right? So when you look at assets or investments, because they're not just like you're saying office spaces or multifamily buildings, is there a component of, almost non-obsolescence that you look for, or like this barrier to entry to these assets where like ANDMORE, Elcar maybe being a little bit different, but like, is there a uniqueness that you look into your assets so there's less competition in the spaces, or like how?
No, I mean, what I would say is like we try to invest in industries that, have strong fundamentals, like tailwinds, and these businesses are going to be around for 10, 20 years. They're not flash in the pan type things. Yes. But you also have to catch them early enough before it's overbought, right? Sure. Like I could say the same thing about self-storage or manufactured housing, but it's almost like the word is out, right?
Yeah. The juice is squeezed.
Industrial, whatever. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to find what we call these pre-institutional industries, right? Mm-hmm. Before it's really gotten institutionalized, right? Before big institutional capital is flooded in. But at the same time, like take the golf industry for example. Like, because I've invested a lot in golf at Goldman, I understood that business. And when we did concert golf, people still didn't really understand, how strong the fundamentals were. And this is pre-COVID. COVID was like a huge boon to golf, but like, of course, pre-COVID. So it was like the way these companies, particularly in private country clubs, the way they got priced, it was like, people were scared of golf still. And so we kind of took advantage of that, mismatch of information, let's say, and did well as a result. But it's those instances, and same with Express Car Wash. We can talk about it later, but same thing. This was like we sensed like this was like the first or second inning of like basically a new asset class being formed, and I think we were right about that.
So was the concert golf like a propco opco model where they kind of bought out like membership interest and lent the? I saw they did all of their acquisitions of clubs, debt free. So they did it in cash, and then what does the private golf course just operate the deal? Like, I guess I didn't understand the structure.
So concert,
it looked pretty unique.
What concert was doing before we bought them, and then we obviously kept going. They would start a conversation with a private club that had some measure of distress. They either borrowed too much to build a clubhouse and had overruns or whatever, or they had huge deferred maintenance they had to cure, irrigation system, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe their membership was aging and they couldn't figure out how to recharge businesses, so they were like potentially losing members, losing money. And so we go to them and we say, look, we're gonna buy your club from you're basically gonna give us the club. We will take on these liabilities. We'll cure the deferred maintenance. We'll pay off your debt. That's kind of the price. And we're going to convert the club from an equity membership model to a non-equity membership model. You're going to still remain members. You're going to still everything basically stays the same. You pay dues. You're just not going to own the club anymore, right? We're going to take over ownership of it. We're going to institutionalize the management. So we manage the clubs too. And what I observe, it's probably one of the worst business ideas ever is to basically have a one-off golf club. Which might have $3 or $4 million of revenue in it, and be self-managed, right, by a board of people that it's not their job. It's like you have bankers and doctors and lawyers overseeing and trying to manage a pretty complex operation. You have maintenance aspects, food and beverage, membership, and all these different competencies. And with that revenue line, you really can't afford super talented people, right? It's not to say these people aren't talented, but you can't pay, for the best operator. So really, right? And so, and then someone leaves and you're struggling, someone quits and goes somewhere else and all of a sudden you have to plug a hole. And, I saw all this happen, from our other ownership positions in different golf companies. And I'm a member of clubs too. I've seen it sort of firsthand. And, anyway, so a lot of clubs get in trouble as a result. And, concert was there to kind of as a responsible steward to take on, not every club qualifies, but to take on those, to take them on. So they own the club, they operate the club.
Wow, it's a brilliant model.
We dabbled with, should we do a sale leaseback and become asset light or whatever? My general posture is like in it. Maybe as a financial arbitrage, it could make sense. We talked about it in car wash too, but we've never done that. Like I was like controlling the real estate and operating at the same time. That's sort of predisposition of mine.
Yeah, it's a great model. They, I think they operate or Country Club of Woodmore Club. I won a junior golf tournament at. I think is a part of concert golf. So, two questions before we dive into any deal you want to talk about. So, when you obviously you've operated these deals here that are on the site, and then I'm sure quite a plethora of others, but these are certainly not the only deals that you underwrite. I'm sure plenty of opportunities come to you. So when you're looking at a deal, and I'm not saying it happens overnight, right? But what jumps out to you in the like when you're looking at the financials of a deal, or even just maybe the brand or the company, or like the green space to move forward? Like, what do you say, like, oh, this is worth digging into? Like, where do you see, what gets you excited about looking at a new company?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for the typical stuff. We're looking for, strong macro fundamentals, right? We like to have green shoots, and not a requirement, but it definitely makes these deals easier to win. Like, if this goes right, this thing gets even better, right? Sure. So we like to find those, but it's really, you take the marina business, right? When you sort of peel the cobwebs away and you look at the supply demand fundamentals of that business, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it, right? You have demand.
In what component?
What's that?
In what way?
Well, you think about I've actually never seen an asset class, particularly in real estate, where you had super strong demand growth that doesn't see supply growth. Okay, and it's fairly obvious why that happens, because you're talking about ocean to build a new marina. Right. You're talking about oceanfront land. The higher and better use is not a marina. It's generally a resi tower or some other higher density thing like that. And so, if anything, marinas are being bought to convert to these other uses.
Shrink supply.
Yeah, and plus you have all the zoning and other difficulties with getting access to a water basin, things like that also make it more complex to build new supply. So what we saw, particularly in Florida, we saw exponential demand growth, spurred a lot by people moving to Florida from New York and other high-tax states, let's say. Yeah. But with no supply growth. Wow. And so what does that result in? The ability to push rents, right? Yeah. And it's not to say you could push them as high as you want, but that's proven itself to be true. Like, of course, supply, pretty basic supply demand fundamentals. Yep. If demand's growing, supply's not. You're going to have a lot of pricing power. So like stuff like that. Like we really want to see that level of durability and growth potential, and that's what carries through all our deals, right? Sure. Same thing with the Gulf, right? We saw the similar fundamentals in terms of supply and demand, particularly with private country clubs. Sure. Families, view that as entertainment for them and their children. Yeah. And that's never going away. Yeah. Right? Of course not. When you're you have kids and you want your kids to be in camps and enjoy summers and go swimming, take swimming lessons or whatever.
Yeah, it's part of life.
It's part of life. So it's not something you give up so easily either.
Yeah, that's
so we saw the durability there as well.
I love that. Last question before kind of highlighting a deal here. You've been doing this for a while, right? Running your own shop, and that's a big jump. Maybe not in a day-to-day skills way, but in a day-to-day life way, being an entrepreneur as opposed to being an investment banker at a big shop. What do you think along the way was something you discounted that you thought was going to be easier? What do you think the biggest challenge was in building and stabilizing your company?
I think it's finding good people. It's all about the business. Yeah. It's, again, another cliche. It's all about the people. It is. It's like, and I never wanted this to be like a business of one. Like, I always wanted to have a team. I wanted to have partners around me. And that's been the hardest part, is because it's not for everybody. Right? Of course not. This is a higher risk thing that we do. We don't have a big fund. We don't have like all this fee income coming in. We can pay people current salaries and things like that. And some people can't. The risk tolerance isn't there. So just by its nature, like the pool of people you can sort of go and hire from is smaller. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is it's kind of a tweener thing, right? It's not quite private equity, it's not quite real estate. So it's like finding people that have the ability to kind of learn it, or who have some experience and can sort of jump in and immediately add value. It's hard. It's hard. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably been the hardest part.
Well, the folks need to be rather innovative as it's this cross in between the two, right? Like, you have to be kind of a free thinker, especially in the deals that you're analyzing. This isn't like underwriting 500 unit apartment deals for the last 10 years and being like, oh, okay, here, this is what we should do. This is like, all right, well, here's horseback riding and, camping and this experiential business. It's so cool. That's interesting. So is there any deal in kind of wrapping up here that sticks out to you or that you want to kind of talk through? Don't have to go crazy in depth, but as much as you want to, any successful deal or challenging deal you've done along the way, could be a Goldman, could be Elcar, could be anything you've done.
We can talk about the car wash deal. It's a fun one.
So in 2019, from what it says, right, you have 4 locations, and then you exit 3 years later with 17 locations, and I think either under contract or own 30 planned other development sites. So in 3 years, that's a massive expansion, right? From actually operating and owning, an additional 13 or so locations, but then also, with the option or planned developments, and then all these pretty big partnerships throughout the state of Florida with the Heat, I think, and a couple other big brands too. So how did it come to you and how did it start?
So, as I mentioned, we were proactively prospecting
That's right.
in the car wash space. And so we actually were close to buying another car wash company called True Blue Car Wash. We ended up loaning them some money as a bridge because they had to get some acquisitions closed. And ended up not being able to buy the company. But when a lot was going on, I was, because my friends knew I was focusing a lot of my time on car wash, introduced me to 2 guys who, one was working at a hedge fund, one was working for a family office, who had put under contract a small portfolio, this 4-unit portfolio in Miami, from a local developer. But didn't know how to get they'd never done a deal before, right? So I met them, and quickly became apparent to me that again, the matchup was good because I knew how to get deals done. They needed someone like me to help them raise a bunch of capital. And that's how it started. And, we raised $100 million, partially from my capital and partially from an institutional sponsor called WAFRA. And that's how it started. And, the thesis going in was, okay, we're going to start with these 4. We're going to basically institutionalize management, and we're going to basically grow it through either M&A and then development. And take advantage of all these forces that were at play, and, sort of in terms of the growth of the space, the growth in demand, and again, the institutionalization of the asset class, where, because multiples have, started, they were already on the rise, but the bet was they would keep going, and that was correct.
So what were the multiples then on buying a car wash? Because now it seems like we're seeing car washes trade hands all the time. New signs go up. It's you're saying, it's more institutionalized. Then almost pre-curve 2019, because it's happened a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. So how were they valued then, or how was that deal valued?
I think we bought the initial 4 for 7 times. Something like that, which, looking back was a steal. Just
of course.
Again, we were buying if you're buying just 4 individual washes with no, kind of overall strategic plan to grow it or whatever, that still is a
good deal.
Reasonable price, like a nice cap rate or whatever,
That's
nice yield. But we were also buying some IP and the ability to grow it in South Florida in a market that wasn't very well penetrated. And so, we obviously bought it well. But the real money was made, if we had just bought 4 and then 7 and sold them for 12 or whatever, it would have been a good deal. But it was a great deal because, we were right about the ability to buy development sites, create this pipeline, and get the benefit of of the multiple expansion along the way too.
So, of those additional 13, how many did you develop in that were brand new, or how many do you think percentage was bought and just rebranded?
Yeah, we were probably we probably should have known this, but the M&A, it was very hard to buy M&A.
Was it?
Because everyone wanted to do what we did. Of course, right? Everyone was looking for the next platform they could grow, and so we tried and failed to buy a bunch of different existing operations, some in Florida, some outside of Florida.
Right.
But everyone and their mother was chasing car wash deals at the time and trying to have their own platform.
Sure.
And so we ended up only buying, I think, 3 or 4, deals that were open and existing, and the balance were, we were basically buying land and building on the land.
Crazy.
Yeah.
At what point? How did the exit come about? So you sold to all the interests were bought by Warburg Pincus.
Yes.
Okay. How did that deal come to be? Was this hey, we know we want to exit this soon. The market's just too good. Like we can get a really good multiple or valuation for this deal, or did they approach you? Like how did it unwind?
No, we'd like COVID happened, and at first we were like terrified, like we're gonna get shut down or whatever.
Of course.
So there was a momentary like freak out period. And then once things settled down, like actually like it was ended up being an accelerant to the business because more people were home, working from home, and there's more demand for these car wash experiences. So we got our sea legs under us plus some, right? The development pipeline was finally starting to take effect, and we could see what the returns on cost looked like. Were really attractive. And then again, we were in this environment where like we were looking at M&A deals, and we were seeing the multiples, 15, 16, 20 times for, because people are paying for the optionality of creating a platform. And so we kind of said, all right, this seems frothy, right?
Right.
And obviously rates, we didn't know rates would rise, but like,
of course,
the low rate environment, every direct lender and every lender wanted to lend to these new platforms. So we said we'd be crazy not to explore what this is worth. So we hired a banker, and Warburg, there were tons of interest because everyone, every mid-market and up PE fund that sort of failed on it. There were a bunch of transactions that already traded, so a lot of guys were like, had done the work, done the white paper, and didn't win. They were chomping at the bit to find a deal to do, kind of like we were. They loved the space.
Absolutely.
And so we got, the lucky part was, we did it right before, multiples
rates
went, before the rates rose. And so that looked smarter than it actually was. The timing, specific timing,
always does, right?
So that was the fortunate part about it. But we had even if we hadn't sold it, we had a great thing going. Like it was almost like, not to say we ever thought about not closing, but it was like, if it didn't work, we're happy. We have a lot of cash flow. It's still going to, sort of up and to the right. We have a great pipeline. What's wrong with this picture? Just cash flow, right? Yeah.
Strong either way. Amazing deal. So in wrapping up, last couple questions for you. What are you guys focused on now? Is there, obviously these market conditions are certainly tumultuous for a lot of different reasons, but what are you focused on forward looking? And then second to that, is there a asset class or industry or niche that you haven't bought in, or a business that you haven't bought that you're like attracted to or you want to do throughout your career? Maybe you haven't bought one thing that you're like, oh man, I really want to buy and operate something like that.
I've tried and failed throughout a long period of time, including at Goldman, to invest in a business in digital infrastructure. And obviously that space is, it's been institutionalized, but there are some seams there that we're exploring now, with teams that, again, that are similarly situated where, like, again, they need not the wrapper, institutional wrapper. That's probably one that comes to mind now, where I've really liked, because this is, especially with AI, like the demand levels for data centers in particular are going to have another step function up, let's say. So we're spending a bit of time just researching the industry and some specific opportunities as well in that area.
Awesome. Very cool. Last question for you. You alluded to it earlier, obviously, but no one can simply make it, especially to the level that you have in business, really, or in life, without good mentors or learning from other folks or getting lucky. Were there certain individuals you think that helped you, or like who specifically kind of helped you as a mentor along the way? Anyone in particular that you think really helped you either at Goldman or here, like anyone that you learned from?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky with a couple of people that, that have maintained relationships over a long period of time. So, one of my first bosses at J&B, I still talk to him. This is now 30 years ago when I first met. David Richter is his name. He's been, even though we don't talk that much, he's like his influence is still felt, and he's like a presence in my life, very positive one. So I'm grateful for him. And then there, I would say most of the bosses I had at Goldman, I think about like guys like Dan Neidick and Ralph Rosenberg, and Dave Hamamoto, Stuart Rothenberg. We're all, those are the guys running the group. and many of whom I still talk to this day, that are, again, present in my life, and we're good mentors. They took care of me, and we care for each other now.
Sure.
Which is it's nice to get
it's a
back
beautiful
to.
circle.
Yeah.
That's right. That's awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you obviously for having me here. This was fantastic. Was there anything we missed about your story or Fireside in general that would be good to highlight? I think we covered a good bit, but
I think we're good.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Pleasure.